Whether we're referring to it as a cat nap or asking what exactly the cat dragged in, the Pacers squandered a 20-point lead to the New York Knicks in what became a deflating 106-100 loss in Game 3 as they struggled to maintain their center of attention both in stopping Karl-Anthony Towns in the fourth quarter as well as scoring against Karl-Anthony Towns with 4 fouls in the fourth quarter. Joining me to discuss what led to the second half collapse in which the Pacers were outscored 61-42 against the Knicks team that started big but ended up finishing quite small is once again Samson Folk.
The front running, it's dead for today. We no longer get to front run. And also to that point, backtracking, yes. And the center of attention or attention regardless. Attention span, it's cratering these days. This is studied. Maybe it's starting to affect the NBA.
They've watched the too many TikToks of an NBA basketball game.
Infinite scroll. That's exactly what this is. They're arguing online. They're mad. They're like, movies. They're like, this is too boring. I need something immediate.
It was somewhat reminiscent of like when you're just opening a bunch of browser windows on the internet and mindlessly scrolling through them, closing them, opening another one without a lot of purpose behind it. That's kind of what it looked like.
Yeah, intentionality is really important. I guess that's the big thing I would remind myself of is that when I said to Benji and DJ, they were letting Brunson off the hook, the Celtics. I think that there were a couple players on the Knicks who got left off the hook. And as much as that, Rick said it last night, their better defenders were in, but to that effect, Landry Shamet is not going to be the rising tide that lifts all boats on defense. And yet, in a couple sequences of closeouts and hanging with drives, it seemed as if he was. That intentionality, the attention to detail that the Pacers needed to take the new defensive look they were receiving and beat it, with which they have a bunch of capability to do so, maybe wasn't so much there, which was disappointing. I had to delete and rewrite a line in the piece. It was, I said, Thibodeau is searching, not even with a flashlight, but seemingly by candlelight for something. But then I had to go back and be like, damn, he found it, which was pretty disappointing because I like that line. Front runner, we're back.
To me, it felt like the problem started before halftime, if I'm being honest. The Pacers were up by as many as 20 points in the first half. By the time they go in to halftime, the lead has been cut to 13. In my opinion, there was a lot of overpassing on drives on several possessions in a row. What do you think was contributing to that?
It's never necessary. It felt like there were shots available to be taken. I can't tell you if what is affecting those players is like a soft dig to get the dribble picked up, or, a guy who probably isn't going to get all the way there to contest at the rim, kind of shading that way. But there was more guys squeezing in, to my eye, than what we've seen before. Because a lot of what the Pacers had been able to do prior to this was getting everybody to step out, manipulating and moving the bigs to different places, and then not having a lot of help at the rim for a guy like Nembhard, for example, or Tyrese when he gets there. It's like he's just clear at the rim. This time, because they're switching more, because they're a little bit quicker and their help principles are a lot more tied together, they're showing more. But again, are these the types of guys who are going to clean the glass, swipe your... I don't really know, or at least I don't think so. I just think it was a passivity and a lack of punch that was unearned. They should have. Take it to the rim, rub some dirt on it. Daggum, all that stuff.
Somehow there was a lineup in the second quarter with Ben Shepherd and Tyrese and Aaron Nesmith and Tony Bradley and Obi Toppin that is what built that lead up. Some of it was because they were getting deflections and easy runouts. Tony Bradley, to his credit, did get rim running for a mismatch, I think, against Deuce McBride. I don't remember exactly what the matchup was.
He caught it, baby hook.
But something that stood out to me during this sequence of lots of getting into the paint and automatically kicking out is that They closed the half with Tony Bradley on the floor. And this is a little bit, I talked a little bit about this after the last podcast, and I said I understood why Rick went to Tony Bradley instead of Thomas Bryant in the last game, in part because of what some of the rebounding issues were. That being said, this is not a basketball team that's used to playing with a big in the dunker spot. They basically don't have spacing like this most of the time. If they play with somebody in the dunker spot, normally it is a guard. It isn't a big. So they were making it pretty easy on Mitchell Robinson to be contesting on a lot of these looks. Like maybe Siakam can go to a floater there, but Robinson also did a good job of not helping up on the drives. He was helping laterally, so they weren't necessarily exposing Bradley in the dunker spot. And yet he was still occupying that space. So you can see it on most of these. Like that's one that maybe Siakam could have finished that with his left
Mhm.
hand. Tyrese, I think, gets in here in a little bit. Bradley's out on this one, but to his credit, he leaves his rebounding area to get to the offensive rebound. But you're going to see the same spacing again, where he's going to go back to the dunker, be in that short corner with Aaron behind him, which is atypical to how they play. Even with Tyrese getting that rejection, then it's a kick out because they're making it really easy for Mitchell Robinson to contest again. It was their lowest expected effective field goal percentage, quote unquote, shot quality of any game in the playoffs so far this year, and they undershot their very low shot quality by 19 percentage points. So just to show people an example, like this is after the All-Star break when they played Memphis. Same screen rejection for Tyrese. The difference being is Miles is in the strong side corner with Jaren Jackson guarding him. That means Desmond Bane is going to be the secondary rim protector. It looks a lot different when Tyrese gets to attack the basket and a guard is protecting it rather than them closing that half with Tony Bradley on the floor, occupying there and allowing New York's best rim protector to be right there cutting off some of those drives. So to me, it wasn't all because of that. There was some decision making there clearly by certain players that maybe you could do something else differently, but I thought they started flying a little bit too close to the sun and getting a little fast and loose with thinking what lineups were working for them and what they built a lead. And that's probably not the way I would have closed out the half if I were them, because that's not, like I said, that's not an alignment that they play with. Like it just doesn't happen because they're two bigs, they're both floor spacers. They like using inverted spacing a lot. I thought that was a little bit counterproductive.
I tweeted, I don't remember the exact quote, but I was like, I can't believe the lineup that Rick is trying to get away with right now. And then they had that run, and I quote tweeted, I said, they got away with it. But then it kind of reared, it's not the exact same lineup, but the principle reared its ugly head, and it led to some things that obviously weren't so great. But it's this game was very unique. And maybe that's why it was so frustrating to lose, is because, the Knicks, the Knicks have a game they definitely shouldn't have lost. And the Pacers have a game they definitely shouldn't have lost. And then there's another game that the Pacers controlled pretty handily. To not be up 3-0 is really disappointing. But, you listen to the guys talk afterwards. It seems like they kind of know, okay, this is where it went wrong. This is where we got away from ourselves. Like, just come back, home game 4, win game, and go up 3-1. But I don't know. It's the playoffs. You can't let it slip away. Like, losing the rope is not ideal at all, and you just have to be better. It's disappointing.
To provide an analogy, I think what it looked like is that they had a cheat sheet to the test and they decided they didn't want it.
Yeah.
They already had the answers. They already have the answers in the series. They already have the answers to pull from the regular season. And for whatever reason, they decided that they didn't want them. So basically what I've set up for the rest of this, hopefully it's not too depressing for all the listeners, but I do think it's instructive in that it might provide some encouragement headed into game 3. So before the better defenders got put in the game, this section I call confusing screening decisions. Nesmith screening Jalen Brunson into the action, as the Pacers have been prone to do. And for some reason, rather than just attacking Jalen Brunson in space, Miles Turner does a chase and goes and gets Jalen Brunson off of the action. And then Tyrese, as he's often does, anticipates that the Knicks are going to scram Jalen Brunson out, and he likes to try to beat the timing of that scram. I guess. I think that you'd rather just him attack Jalen Brunson right off the dribble, especially since, just to remind everyone, Jalen Brunson had 4 fouls at halftime, and this is 6 minutes into the third quarter. So Aaron tries to attack that closeout from Cat. He misses the very obvious drop-off pass to Miles Turner right under the basket, and then unfortunately he ends up turning his ankle. The Pacers were up by, 13 there, and then they ended up stuff turned for the worse when Aaron came out of the game. This one, I don't really understand why once Tyrese has Karl-Anthony Towns. You wouldn't have done that one in space. He gives it to Siakam. It's almost the exact same thing that Miles Turner just did. So now you're getting a worse matchup again with OG switching onto the ball. Siakam obviously got 39 points in game 2 going at a variety of different matchups. But for me, like if Tyrese wasn't going to be turning the corner against some of these switches that they were getting, or they were going to screen themselves into worse matchups as they did on occasion during the third quarter, what I probably would have liked to see a little bit more is actually like, here's an example against the Los Angeles Lakers from last year. Tyrese gets a switch against Anthony Davis. So imagine that's Karl-Anthony Towns. If he's going to get off the ball, I'd rather Siakam just turns the ball with an attacking angle directly at Towns and then let Tyrese attack that matchup through the closeout, whether that's a shot or like here against the Memphis Grizzlies, exact same thing. Siakam dribbles directly at the big at a north-south attacking angle, draw that away from Tyrese, and then if there's an indirect closeout against Tyrese, you can cut that corner. Rather than what you're seeing back here on these possessions where like that one where Towns is up on Tyrese and he gets off the ball. Siakam's not even looking to turn the ball downhill there, and Towns has his back turned to Siakam to be more or less face guarding Tyrese. There's a very easy opportunity there. Like I said, very simple way to attack these types of switches is just to drive the big and get them off of Tyrese so he can attack the switch through the closeout. Because I do think that the integrity of the switches was a little bit better from the Knicks than what we saw in the prior 2 games. I thought that Karl-Anthony Towns held his head above water a little bit better, in part because, as you mentioned, they were pinching in a little bit more against those switches than what they were doing in the past. But I don't really know why you want to screen better defenders onto the ball after you already have the more favorable switch. And if you don't feel like you can clear the switch without a screen, then reverse the matchup of who's attacking the switch and let it be more Siakam on ball and let Tyrese be doing it through a closeout situation, especially since very quietly, I'm not going to make a big deal out of this, but when he did that volleyball roll in the first half, I had thoughts in my head that I was like, I wonder what type of a driving game this is going to be from Tyrese the rest of the game. Because anytime he does something like that, and then you can see him holding that hip in his back, I'm usually pretty certain that you're not going to see a lot of attacks from him at the rim. So, wasn't real pleased with what some of the screening decisions were in the third quarter, and that was long before they started going to some of the lineups with better defenders in the game.
Yeah, those probably the 3 biggest things. I guess like the we'll get to the Karl run in the fourth quarter, obviously, but the 3 biggest things is that Tyrese wanted screens where he didn't want them in the past, and obviously what you just spoke to there might be a motivating factor. Definitely, I thought the initial stuff, the Knicks didn't necessarily solve anything, but in the scramble aspect of where they were, I thought they were much stronger, especially with like the backup, like the bench defenders in the game. And the Pacers just were forced into like not only because of the alignment and where it placed the low man and in proximity to the rim, but also like how guys closed out to like zone up the weak side, how guys were helping, and it just the Pacers were making much more difficult reads as passers. I know Neesmith missed a really easy one, but they were making much more difficult reads as passers, and also making questionable reads as like pitch plays, screeners. What are we doing at the top? But to go back to your commentary about like the cheat sheet, they would have the answers that they had in games 1 and 2, and they would go away from it, which is a little bit spellbinding. But I mean, them's the breaks, I suppose.
Next section, I refer to this as please cut someone, because they were cutting in the prior 2 games. As kind of predicted when you and I mentioned, like, if the Knicks start double big, which I should have said at the top, they did. They made a lineup adjustment to put Mitchell Robinson in the starting lineup, and they did slightly win the minutes with both bigs on the floor, but what actually gave them more trouble, which we'll get to in the fourth, is when they went small with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5. But
wait, can I say something?
Yeah.
Prediction time. If they start the 2 big lineup in game 4, I think they're going to get shellacked at the start of the game. That's my prediction.
Yeah, so I mean, what we predicted and thought the Pacers would do in process is what they did. So whoever Karl-Anthony Towns was guarding, that player was used as the initial screener, and then they put Miles in the ball side corner. This is smart spacing a lineup to try to crack that defensive unit. My question is if Miles is going to be in the strong side corner, where typically, defenders aren't going to be apt to help, especially if it's a center, and you have Karl-Anthony Towns in space, First of all, when Aaron cuts down to the dunker spot, you really want Siakam to be spacing out further out to the wing to create that wider gap. Some of these things that were going on in the third quarter were just, very simple spacing tweaks. But I really like if Miles would have used a gravity cut there. Like if he starts crashing further than he did to the dunker spot and then just replaces himself back in the corner, Robinson's going to help off. And that then when he goes back out to the strong side, that might have actually opened the gap for Tyrese more than what it did. Either way, he's playing off of Miles. Like that should be a catch and shoot three for Miles rather than a harder step back, moving back to his right in that situation. Another one with the cutting, you just mentioned how they were zoning up the weak side zone. TJ, as we all know, very good at turning the corner out of sideline interactions, out of pistol actions, gets 2 feet in the paint. Typically, once he's right here, that does trigger the kill cut 45 cut from Ben Shepherd that you're seeing there. But the Knicks were very active in sitting on his drives to take away that corner pass. So there's really no advantage here. So then he has to Nash clear out to the top. And then another big question this entire time after Tyrese set the screen for TJ to turn the corner, he's being guarded by Jalen Brunson again. Very easy thing for TJ just to pass it back to the player being guarded by Jalen Brunson in a pitch action, like you mentioned. And instead, it's like, no, let's just throw it out of bounds to Obi. Like very simple decisions. This is a case. You and I talked about this game after the bench beat the Minnesota Timberwolves up in Minnesota. And I made a similar point where with the 45 cutting out of the TJ drives, the Timberwolves were sitting on the corner pass to Obi and taking that away. As we all know, when Obi made a game winner, look at the tweak that they made. Rather than Ben Shepherd simply cutting from the 45, he screened Obi's man so they couldn't sit on that pass and basically turned it into a hammer screen for Obi to get back to the corner. So, like, just little simple tweaks. Like, again, they have the answers to the test from prior games and from this very game. And for some reason, it was like, nope, not only are we not going to make the tweak for TJ to make the simpler pass that he's made a million times to Obi in the left corner when he drives right, but we're also not going to give it to the star point guard when he's being guarded at the top of the key by Jalen Brunson.
Yeah. And they had no savior in this game either. I wondered, like, when Pascal hit the 2 shots late, like when they gave him, I was like, I wonder, but I wrote in my piece, I was like, this is working, but it's probably not going to be enough because the Knicks are getting easier looks. And the Pacers, 5 of 25 from 3. Nothing outside of like foul trouble for the Knicks. Nothing really broke in the Pacers' favor in this game. And they didn't have like a singular savior. Even if they had gone to Pascal Moore, which I think probably would have merited down the stretch, I don't know if they would have been able to score with the Knicks because their defense was so rough. And like they didn't have a lot of answers there. But yeah,
let's talk briefly about the post touches. So again, to provide some context here, the Pacers somehow lost the minutes with Siakam and Turner on the floor against small ball lineups for the Knicks. So there's groupings that are McBride, DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, Josh Hart, Karl-Anthony Towns, and the Pacers somehow, let me see the number here, they broke even. 13 minutes, 0. I don't exactly know how you go 0 when you have 2 guys who are capable of, Miles not the same post repertoire as Siakam, but can certainly duck in against a smaller player. Pascal capable of posting all of those guys, honestly. And it was not an advantage for them. I don't really know how those were break-even minutes when the Knicks went that small with Towns at the 5, with no rim protector out there.
Yeah. When you watched it back, what was the motivating factor for you?
Post touches. Siakam's being guarded by Josh Hart. Once again, I don't really know why you need to screen Hart in this situation. Just automatically duck against Josh Hart into the post. We've seen that he can be successful against that matchup. Instead, it's just reversing it to the opposite side of the floor, despite the fact that the Knicks are playing a small lineup. And I will give the Knicks credit that I thought in some of these groupings, it is their better defenders. These are guys obviously better than Jalen Brunson defending at the point of attack. And I thought that they did extend the pressure to an extent. But the fact that that possession ended in a bailout foul from Miles Turner shooting a contested 2-point jump shot, I don't really know. Because, like, here's game 2. Siakam just goes down the court and realizes, oh, Josh Hart's guarding me, and just establishes position and goes to the face-up jab and go and gets right to the rim. Like, I don't really know why some of the screening that was happening. They called a timeout and deliberately tried to get Siakam a post touch against this lineup. This is floppy. Anytime they do screen to screener on the left side, it's to get Siakam a post touch to proceed the post up with an off ball action so he can get a cleaner catch. If I pause it right back there when they're running it, watch Josh Hart when Benedict Mathurin comes off that screen, the screener dance. He actually steps off of Siakam to bump Mathurin. Landry Shamit's still trying to cut the corner. Siakam right now is being guarded by no one in the paint. And yet he couldn't maintain advantage in position there with Josh Hart coming behind him. Like watching this is very frustrating, Samson. It's
That
very
one, I think,
frustrating for me.
he couldn't maintain advantage because there was no body to put himself on. Like, he thought he was catching a pass.
But that's why it's even worse. How is the ball not getting to him closer when literally everyone has stepped off of him? They paid
Well,
attention to the person coming off the picks.
yeah, I thought on that one that I'd give the tick against Shep because Shep sees that Hart is helping, but Pascal doesn't know that. But yeah, that was a particularly infuriating play when I watched that one last night. But answers to the test. There are answers on the floor. Sometimes they can get away from that stuff. And also it did seem too, like it happens with switching schemes, is that you can kind of like frazzle teams. And the Pacers have been very good over the course of this playoffs at not getting frazzled necessarily, but you can frazzle teams by like bumping out the shell of your defense, like extending the pressure, like stepping a little higher. And the Pacers didn't respond to that well at all. And it's happened a couple times in this postseason where that pressure has been extended and they've not been immediately able to identify, like, let's compose, let's make sure we get it to our guys on the inside, because that extended pressure means longer doubles. It means more space to work. And they know all this. They're just not identifying it early enough in offensive sets. And that's tough.
And that's kind of the point too. Like that floppy was a play call out of an ATO, but sometimes random offense is great in the playoffs because teams don't know how to gear up and scout it.
Yeah.
But it can also lead to some clunk, and there was a lot of clunk in the third and fourth quarters at times where I was like, maybe some play calling would have been to their benefit. And
Also,
that, yeah.
as a quick mention too, like where Tyrese was saying after the game, like he's walking the ball up the court. He said, when I go into the film, I'm going to see I should have pushed faster. Like there was the one play where they laboriously ended up getting Pascal a touch on Deuce, but he had to take a
He
long
was
two
pushed all the
because,
way, like 16 feet out.
yeah, he was pushed 16 feet out. And by the time he caught the pass, it was like 7 seconds on the shot clock or something like that. So they couldn't even have him dribble into a double and then start working the ball, that advantage from there. It was just like, take a jumper. And it's just like, damn, that pace, that pep, that zip is so important to what they do, especially if you're going to be hunting that kind of stuff, because you need to be able to reverse the ball or beat doubles with the pass. And if you don't have the shot clock, it's not an advantage any longer.
Yeah, that's why I thought at times it would have almost been better for them, because like when they just called basic stack, it was like, oh yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't really know how to guard stack, and he's trying to hop around the back screen. And Tyrese is a big guard and can just shoot over the top of a switch out of stack right over the top of Deuce McBride. But then it was like more going back and forth with the stuff between Towns and Miles. And there's those stunts that you're talking about. Like it's just a slight jab from Deuce McBride off the corner, and Towns he picked up his fourth foul, I think, in the third quarter with more than 6 minutes, with more than 6 minutes to play in the third. He played the entire fourth with 4 fouls. They just were they weren't wanting to try him off the dribble much at all until, like, of course, the most ideal outcome of this possession is for Aaron Nesmith on a bad ankle to be trying to self-create against OG on an OB. And so Deuce, I felt in particular, was pretty active with some of the stunts, and then it goes back to some of the cutting stuff. Like when Tyrese is going towards the 2 side, if they're going to play up higher towards the nail, Nembhard has all that wide open chasm to cut in behind that stunt, and they just stayed glued to the 3-point line until it's kind of scrolling through browsing windows again. And that was stuff that was there for them. There's that peel from OG. And that's why their shot quality from 3 was lower than in prior games, is possessions such as that, where they're not necessarily keeping the ball ahead of the defense. They're moving the ball without quite as much purpose. But like, this is why when they had the inverted spacing and Josh Hart is like looking at Jalen Brunson, that's the type of cut that Andrew needed to make against the defense in some of these situations that would have loosened up what the coverage was. Even if you want to give credit to the Knicks for better defense and having better defenders out there was simple things that they just did, again, like answers to the test, that they did in game 1 and game 2, and they just were not doing it.
We're very pro Andrew. Like we've talked glowingly. I don't know if there's Basketball She Wrote the outlet. There's definitely the most pro positive Andrew Nemhard outlet out there. But it was a bad game. Like it's the first bad game I think I've seen from Andrew in like some time. It was a rough game last night.
I don't really want to talk about the offense anymore. I think that pretty much sums up why they only mustered 42 points in the second half of that basketball game,
They'll
despite,
score in game
yeah.
4.
And that's why I said, hopefully what people take from that is, while it's very frustrating to watch, I think that even with the lineup adjustments that the Knicks made, they have ways that they should be able to crack this. And like what Tyrese said, if they go back and look at the film, they're likely going to have a lot of regrettable mistakes, but also like, I didn't think that the Knicks did anything that the Pacers should be like, oh, that market change is what took them out of this, and I don't really know how they can solve it.
I do. Yeah, there is that. But also the Knicks did. Like they played better defenders. They won their minutes without Brunson on the floor. They lost their minutes with Brunson on the floor. Like that mattered. But also a lot of the clips you're showing, Brunson is out there and they are failing to take advantage. They let him off the hook. I don't know how to say it. Yeah. Tough.
It's just like unfathomable to me that they lost minutes when the Knicks went that small when they were playing both of their bigs out there who are capable post-up threats. But beside the point, the other end of the floor, Karl-Anthony
Just
Towns had,
quickly as a
yeah,
thing, there's nothing more frustrating than that, by the way, because Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner are both very good, and especially Pascal Siakam. There's this thing that happens where Tony Bradley catches deep against Deuce McBride for a baby hook. That looks like the easiest thing in the world. You see it when the Pacers go small, and you're like, holy hell, these big men are destroying us. Why can't we do that?
and that's actually what's interesting, because the big lineup, what actually stood out in the first few minutes of that, really had nothing to do with Siakam and Towns. I mean, with Towns and Robinson, I was paying attention to the fact that with Tyrese guarding Bridges and Nemhard guarding OG, the Knicks were very active early to be like, let's do early work against these smaller guards because we're now bigger at almost every position. And the Pacers had that same advantage in the reverse, and they didn't do much about it. But beside that, there was the other end of the floor where maybe we wouldn't be talking about this quite as much if they hadn't lost the plot of the offense and the pace of the offense in the second half. However, Karl-Anthony Towns had 4 points through the first 3 quarters, and he scored 20 in the fourth. Your thoughts about what the Cat dragged in the fourth quarter against the Indiana Pacers?
I do think that there's stuff the Pacers can and will clean up, but I would like to credit the star Karl-Anthony Towns on some unbelievable shot making. The drives, I think, is where you're like, guys, come on. Like this is really bad defense. But seeing them run a big small pick and roll with Deuce McBride and watching Carl pound dribble step back out of it for a pull-up 3 is like, damn, that's talent. That's unbelievable talent. That hair trigger pull on the catch, his eyes barely identify the rim and the shot's going up and bang from 3. Like that is talent. That's real talent. And Carl played really aggressive to, like that gut cut was really great because the Pacers they were hanging in, they were holding in, and even a couple of those threes, it's like the Pacers played up front. They're like, okay, we have the play in front of us. We're doing this. And he just bangs a triple. And then when they play sloppy, he breaks it down. They break down. He's like, I have a cut here and gets an and one dunk. I was really impressed with Carl. I wasn't impressed with the Pacers, but that's often how it goes.
I guess I would look back at our prior episode and the clips that I showed of Andrew Nemhard's off-ball defense against Josh Hart and why that was a key part of what they were doing defensively. And I'm pretty certain why the Knicks removed Josh Hart from the starting lineup and made him a 6-man instead. And I want to give the Pacers somewhat the benefit of the doubt because the rotation, obviously, in this game, given that the Knicks played 9 guys in the first half and were playing small ball lineups with Cat at the 5 with people who have not even played in this series to date, was probably somewhat difficult to adjust on the fly against. But when you've spent the entire series helping off of Josh Hart, and then you're just suddenly not doing it. And these are the stats that people need to know. Josh Hart played the entire fourth quarter. All 12 minutes he was out there. Cat played 11 minutes. All of the minutes that Cat was out there, Josh Hart was also out there too. Brunson and Robinson, both in combination, not out there for 9 of the 11 minutes. And yet, not doubling Karl-Anthony Towns while he's amassing 20 points in the fourth quarter. To me, you had two options. You either stop guarding Karl-Anthony Towns with Miles Turner and Tony Bradley, which I will emphasize in a few minutes from now, and you put Siakam on him, or if you're going to dig really deep and put Tony Bradley on an all-star in the fourth quarter, maybe you try Jarris Walker against Karl-Anthony Towns if you're going to dig that deep into the bench. Or you help from Josh Hart and you go double, and I guess you keep guarding him with the centers because that's what you've been doing through 3 games. And I will give Karl-Anthony Towns credit. He's an all-star for a reason. But they certainly made it easier on him. Like 100% they made it easier on him than what it needed to be.
We've talked about this. Like, he did get Siakam the one time, and it was a good drive. There wasn't really like a lot of help provided to Siakam, and Karl kept like working, kept his dribble alive, ended up
There
going
was
left.
none. And Miles was top side guarding Josh Hart, and there was none.
Yeah. And credit to Karl, because he still struggles driving in those situations regardless. And Pascal was trying to hang in, no help came, and Karl found his way there. But a lot of it is like, it is a tried and true thing. It is a very identifiable piece of who Karl is as a player. Is like he will drive the biggest of the bigs, and he loves being able to do that. And he is vexed when that is not the case. The man standing across from him. So they made his matchup really easy for him, and he just popped the hell off. And he did the hard stuff, and he did the easy stuff.
And this was part of the reason why when you and I were talking about Deuce McBride, I was like, if they're not going to be able to stop the Pacers offense anyways, I would probably start Deuce so that they can't help off of Josh Hart and open the floor completely for Karl-Anthony Towns to be doing things like this. But Josh Hart was still on the floor for the entire fourth quarter. So we are going to look at this film because it needs to be discussed. So here's Miles Turner guarding Karl-Anthony Towns. Siakam is guarding Josh Hart on the weak side. As we pointed out in the preview, normally if they are going to double on a drive or in the post, it would be from the top defender. Even if you do double from Ben Shepherd here, there's 3 other people to guard the 4. You got to do something here because he's going to start cooking heavily in the fourth quarter against every center that guards him. As you noted, Siakam only guarded Towns for 2 half-court possessions in the fourth quarter. There was 21 half-court possessions against Miles Turner and Tony Bradley. Miles is top, guarding Josh Hart. Why is there multiple dribbles being taken without a double team?
And also, who got to that ball first, right? Josh Hart, anyway. Just...
Then there's 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Miles Turner has come out. Miles wasn't making shots in the fourth quarter. I will give Miles credit because I actually did think at the beginning of the game that his box outs against Mitchell Robinson were much better than the prior 2 games, but wasn't making shots in the fourth quarter. Wasn't really stopping Karl-Anthony Towns center versus center in the fourth quarter. They sub in Tony Bradley with 5:50 to go. They're clinging to a 1-point lead. And even if they wanted to have a rim protector on the floor, like they have Tyrese on Josh Hart. And Tony Bradley in space is guarding Karl-Anthony Towns. And he at least tries to shade him to the left, which is something I've been harping on. You don't have a choice. This has to be a peel switch from Pascal Siakam. It has to be. Even with OG in the strong side corner, I don't really care. At a certain point in time, when Josh Hart and the other guys that are out there, whether that's DeLon Wright, whether it's Deuce McBride, whether it's Landry Shamet, those other people have to beat you. It's so many drives from Towns. Plus, you're allowing a third-string center to guard an all-star in the fourth quarter of a game when you're up 3-0. This is the one that you're talking about with the step-back 3, where I would then ask, Nesmith's back in the game. He's guarding Josh Hart now. Why wouldn't you just switch this? Mm-hmm. Why is Miles staying on him through the screening action and then late stepping up off the switch pocket if they were going to screen it with Siakam? Incredible shot making, but I don't know why you're not switching it. And what's funny is Mikal Bridges now has Tyrese in the post. Andrew's back guarding Josh Hart as he did in the prior 2 games, and suddenly they can double the post off of Josh Hart when it's Mikal Bridges. And then Miles gets easily back cut watching the post mismatch by Towns. I don't know. And this is the first half, which I will say, like, to Towns' credit, he was pretty much kind of a bulldozer because here Andrew, being a small defender, did attempt to jump switch clear off of Josh Hart, and he still scored over the two people. But, and I gave you this number before we started this, they only doubled Cat, and by the word double, it means like that. If somebody else is jumping over to the ball, it's not even like a hard double team in the post. They only doubled Cat on 12.28% of his 57 touches in this game, which is the second fewest of any game. Frequency of any game from the Knicks during the playoffs. Like, it just wasn't something that they were actively looking to do.
But like,
and in this case, like, now Siakam with size is on Josh Hart. And that even is, again, something else that I would ask. Like, you've seen all of this. There's minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Aaron's over there guarding Mikal Bridges. You can see that Towns is going to approach for another screen. Why not pre-switch Miles off of Towns? Instead, he's back in the action again. Towns catches it, but at least Siakam's low. Tyrese motions for him to go on to Josh Hart. He was guarding on Anunoby. And then there's the difference when he steps up and actually helps. Like, it's so unlikely that Towns is going to pass out of a drive. I don't know how many times I've even seen that.
Well, it seemed like they had it sorted because it was either 3 out of 4 possessions or 3 in a row possessions. Like, obviously Pascal, I guess ref talk back on, he blocked the hell out of Deuce McBride.
Oh no, his last 3 defensive possessions were tremendous.
Yeah, it was the cleanest block of all time. And then he hung around for Cat, and then he hung around for, he didn't get credited with a block on the other one. When I was looking at the box score, I don't know what happened, but 3 incredible low man rotations in a row, and something to keep in mind for other games, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think if they had that to do over and we're looking back at it, that, like I said, it would have been one of two things. Either you're going to put Siakam / Nembhard onto Josh Hart and be completely roaming off and doubling Karl-Anthony Towns, or you're going to take Miles and Tony Bradley off of Karl-Anthony Towns because they couldn't stay in front of him as a driver at all. And maybe we wouldn't have cared as much. Maybe we would have just been talking about, like, wow, what a tremendous quarter from Karl-Anthony Towns if the offense hadn't gone
I
the
think
sludge as much as it did.
Still,
but I think I still would have asked some questions about exactly why that happened. But certainly, as much as the Knicks felt like they let one get away in game 1, the Pacers let a really prime opportunity go in game 3. That being said, looking forward, as I've kind of mentioned here, I think that stuff is fixable. I don't know that if you'll replicate the same environment to be able to be doubling Towns, because that's why it was even more egregious, because like I said, Brunson and Robinson were on the bench for 9 of those 11 minutes. Because I could see not doubling him if, Robinson's in the dunker spot, sure, because you might be giving up tons of offensive rebounds, or you don't want the second star to be going off in rotation against a rotating defense, but they weren't out there. So I don't know. Those circumstances probably aren't going to be there for their taking again. Maybe they will be. Brunson's been in foul trouble in 2 of these games, but I think that that's fixable. I think a lot of the offense is fixable. It's not the most fun thing to look back at and watch, but hopefully you just get it out of your head. Don't spend too much time dwelling on it, and they come back in game 4 and have a better performance than what the second half of this game was.
Yeah. I think that's the fun thing about the playoffs, I suppose, right? Is Knicks fans they probably expected to get gamed a little bit by Tyrese and Pascal. They probably didn't expect it to be Aaron Nesmith, a hellacious firestorm, the Kevin Harlan, he's a flamethrower, down game 1. And I certainly didn't expect to be coming out of game 3 with a 20-point lead evaporating and looking at Landry Shamet plus 12. Just like, whoa, what are we looking at here?
Well, the thing is, too, is that, the Aaron injury looms. And I'm not going to do the reverse of what this was last year. Like, if the Knicks win this series, pull it out, and the Pacers don't, I'm not going to talk nonstop about the injuries. But for the Pacers' sake, that will be a significant loss, and it will make it far more challenging for them. There was a reason why I wrote Aaron as the key X factor in this series. So hopefully his ankle remains good to go headed into the next one, because I do think that was a pretty significant turning point.
When we think about who Aaron replaced in the starting lineup, it was, and that guy's having a really tough time. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't many of the things that we already talked about with regard to that player on the last show still apply. So if people want answers on what I think's going on there, you can go listen to that. Or several of the articles that I wrote during the season actually kind of foreshadowed this. So you can go read those as well. But do you have anything else that you maybe happier times, something else that you want to dwell on from this game? Those were mainly the things that I wanted to run through, which hopefully come across more positive than what my presentation of them was.
I think I'll posit a bit of a. I think that the Pacers were very used to how the Knicks played. And I think that was the great utility of Tibbs going to other lineups. And like I saw Benji tweet, like, what the hell is this lineup? Like I know Knicks fans were probably like, what the hell am I seeing right now? But the quirks and rhythms of how the Knicks played were really, really different in this game. And that's why there were so many uncanny passes, even from Tyrese, right? Where he's like, damn, I didn't expect a hand in there. I didn't expect a rotation here. Just basically all of the reads that they were used to making, all of the like, when I dive, they pull from here and there's a gap here and everything, the calculus changed. And the Pacers were just far too late in identifying that, or even if they ever identified it, figuring out like what they wanted to do against that. But again, feel confident, Pacers fans, going into game 4 because Shamit Landry, a world beater, is not. And Karl-Anthony Towns, despite hanging in incredibly well on all of the switches, does not mean he's all now an incredible switch defender. You know, these things are solvable. And maybe I could look like a big old jackass, ding, 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 if the Pacers lose game 4, but they still have answers here.
And the funny thing is that like what was talked about nonstop was that they were making the adjustment to play double big, and that isn't really what bothered the
No,
Pacers.
no, and the Pacers, like I said, the Pacers got really good shots at the start of last game, and they just didn't hit any, which was completely different than the first 2 games where everything went in to start. And I thought that the defensive, like the structure, the solidarity of their defense to start for the Knicks was not like good. I thought the Pacers did really well, and I think in game 4, if they go chalk and say we're going big again, I think the Pacers will hit some shots and they'll have an early lead. And that's my prediction, but that could always be wrong.
The Pacers scoring 0.682 points per chance with Karl-Anthony Towns as the screener defender is not a stat that I
He
expected to read.
is. They don't have to check in Precious Achua, the switch defender. They already have him in Karl-Anthony Towns.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I feel kind of bad because I enjoy much more the podcast, and which have pretty much been exclusively what we've done after wins, where
Front runner.
I just get to talk about look at all the different players Siakam scored on, instead of what in the world is this?
Well, you've covered bad Pacers seasons, obviously. This is like, I realized this, that in a winning season with the Raptors, like I get to write these cool articles about stuff that like this is what makes it work. I remember I did this big breakdown on RJ Barrett, who, if there's Knicks fans listening, probably a few. RJ Barrett time. Raptors fans, probably a few. RJ Barrett actually improved measurably as a pick and roll ball handler. And I would say he's like quite competent at it now. I did this video essay, which typically mine do quite well, about like why he's so much better. Walking through the film, really informative stuff. Nobody watched it because everyone's like, this team sucks, dude. Tell us who they're trading. It's not as many people like this podcast will have less views than the other podcasts because people don't like delving into the losses, I don't think.
Sometimes they do want to look for reassurances as to why something isn't
They
broken, though.
do, but that's a smaller percentage than like the losses can have a lot if it's the immediacy. Like you go live after and you're like, these guys, oh my God, what are we doing? Like that could definitely have a lot. But the next day, Yes, we have a few answers you may like to know. I don't know if it's gonna pull the same audience.
See, this is where you have far more experience than me, though, because like if we had gone
Oh,
live
because
today,
I'm the loser. Always the
no,
loser.
no, because I've never done live recap pods except for the few that
Mm.
I've hopped on with you or other people on. I don't normally do that. I've never done one after a Pacer game for myself. So like, I just wonder, on a holiday, how many people would have been hopping on here and alive to be like,
Well,
the
no, not
count
even
says like 5.
the that was my biggest critique. Like people would say it, they'd be like, Samson, he just doesn't seem like passionate enough, like after a loss. Cause I'd be like, okay, so here's how they lost the game. This is what's going wrong, like all that kind of stuff. I wasn't like, these guys, oh, I'm disgusted, sickened. Like, and they're like, does he care? It's like, yeah, I'm just not calling them losers, or whatever. Yeah. But the tenor is a quieter one, and with us as well. But I try to be a little bit louder.
I was
And
a bit frustrated running that film of the Towns defense. I think that I came through a bit.
should have front loaded that going, what the hell are these guys doing? Be
I
like,
wonder how
because
that
that,
would have played on. I don't think people would expect that from me. I wonder how that particular clip would have gone over.
well, I think it probably really well, especially if you got it wrong, because yelling at defensive rotations without understanding things
That's a
and
big hit on YouTube.
yelling and screaming
Yeah.
is a big hit everywhere because nobody can tell the difference. Like, why
For
isn't this guy there?
sometimes I would really like there to be reaction pods videos to those reaction videos.
Yeah.
Especially when players are being asked to do things that they would never actually do within a defensive scheme, or there's like asking a team to play a defensive scheme that they don't ever play.
I
That's my
think
favorite parts of those.
I would like the people who do that to like sit with a coach and be like, "Why?" And the coach be like, "We don't do that. Like that's not
I've
the
seen one where
scheme."
there's like a double drag and people are like, "Well, expecting somebody to chase over both screens, why isn't Tyrese just switching on the first one?" I'm like, "'Cause they would literally never do that." I don't know what matchup it would have to be for Tyrese to jump out as the first
Yeah,
screener
and
defender
then
and
yeah,
switch.
jump out, switch, and then climb over the next one. This is great
Yeah,
coverage. That's
that's
what you.
exactly what the suggestion is. You're gonna say, "Can I ask you something?"
Oh, oh
Ask it.
yes, because I've been asked this. Do you think Timothy Chalamet's presence at these games is all contrived, or do you think he's like a fan's fan?
I think he likes to style himself in a somewhat contrived way when he's among his fellow New
Mm.
Yorkers. But I think that he enjoys the New York Knicks and genuinely does root for them.
Do you ever see that picture of him? Like he showed up and got free tickets when he was like 12 years old.
Mm-mm.
I think he's been like, I think he is the same way Spike Lee was. I think this is, and Ben Stiller obviously is too, is like, I think Timothy Chalamet is, yes, extremely famous, but I think he is like a fervent nutso Knicks fan. Like, I
Yeah.
think, I think it's real. But I shouldn't have said like, I think I'm a fan and then did this. I'm such an idiot. I've lost all objectivity.
When you're a stan of somebody, you don't question anything they
I'm
do.
not a stan. How dare you say
I
that?
think you're probably on Timothy Chalamet message boards.
No. That yeah, how funny would it be if I'm like, "Oh, I don't I don't listen to sports talk, you know? I'm simply on the Timothy Chalamet message boards." Oh, that'd be so funny. I'm very interested to see what you leave in and what you cut from the last like 10 minutes. What a great conversation we had, Caitlin. Wouldn't you agree?
It was. And I guess we can't let one thing. Are you at all worried one way or the other? Here's how we can close it out in a non controversial way. The Pacers still have a 2-1 lead. You've given more thought to coming to Indiana if they do, in fact, make the finals. You've put this out there on podcasts. Are you getting worried that you might have to come or that you might not get to come?
Is that a serious question?
Yes.
Both. This, I'm so
Both.
glad. I'm no, no, I'm no, both isn't the answer. I'm saying like This is like a podium question. You know what I mean? You said let's not like on a controversial note, and then you asked something. It's like I need a definite. Like it wasn't like open end. It was like, come on, give me the. We gotta get you in a press room. Excuse me. Do you feel like you helped or hindered their ability to win that game? So, I would be crestfallen if I wasn't able to come to Indiana to cover a finals game. Crestfallen, Caitlin.
I allowed my mind to wander to parade routes, Samson. I haven't run through the tape. I've allowed my mind to think about those types of things for the
Oh,
first
we
time
are
in my
front runners.
time of doing Pacers coverage, and I didn't run through the tape. You got to run through the tape. Didn't happen.
I
But
still think they're going to the finals. Like this game, I picked them in 7. I expected them to lose 3 of these, so I certainly did expect them to take both in New York. I thought they were going to lose game 1 before game 1 happened. I said it on the podcast with Trey. I was like, I think the Knicks will win game 1. Well, they didn't. Pacers took the first 2. Now I expect the Pacers to win game 3, but they didn't. They should have, but they didn't. Can't, shouldn't, shon't, won't. That's life. I want to
okay.
come to Indiana and see what's out there. See if it, if it is all copacetic with my small town sensibilities. Actually, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come to Indiana. I'm going to call everybody there City Slickers.
I don't know how that'll go over. I am a little bit worried about your ability to get to Nicey Treat. I gave this some thought, and I was like, it's not really that close.
How far is
This
it in kilometers?
Oh yeah, I know that off the top of my head. I'll do that conversion. No, I mean there's 2 locations, but the one that I go to in
There
Fishers is
was some
north of Indy.
significant twang on when you said conversion. Conversion.
I
There's
didn't
some.
know I had twang.
Oh, you had twang there. The conversion. A daggum conversion. If I had it for you, I gave it.
I had to do some ciphering. Okay.
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron. Yeah.
Now I'm like self-conscious about it, and I feel like I need to be
No, twang
very.
is good.
But anyways, Nicey Treat is in Fishers, which is north of Indy, and that's not very close to Gamebridge. And the airport is south of Indy, which is in the opposite direction of where Fishers is. So I don't know.
Fishers? Is that like a part of Indianapolis? Is that like a
No, it's
neighborhood?
like a suburb separate, like north of Indy.
How wide is Indy like a big sprawling city? I imagine it would be, right?
No, the nice thing about it is it's extremely walkable and everything's set up around the circle. So like I said, like when I go and when I'm there downtown, I don't get in and out of my car. I just walk everywhere.
It does look pretty tight. Fishers. Oh, okay, I see it. Oh, it's just outside.
Mhm.
What the hell, Fishers? There's an IKEA. All
Yep,
right, that's interesting.
it's right. It's close. IKEA's like right down the road. It's IKEA Way, not that
Oh,
far from Nicey
okay,
Treat.
wait.
And my fave slapfish.
What is a slapfish?
It's right next to Nicey Treat. I always double down on both. I go eat at Slapfish because it's all seafood. It's like lobster rolls and all types of stuff like that. And then I go next door and I go chase it with a Nicey Treat popsicle. Those are my 2 favorite spots.
Okay, so wait. Nicey Treat. Wait, Slapfish is right beside Nicey Treat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it is. How far is it? It won't tell me the distance. Oh, 23 miles.
See, it's not super close.
That's not walkable.
No. I'm gonna have to figure out a way around that. So I really do
It says
love Slapfish.
it would take me 6 hours to walk there, sorry. Because I was thinking of making a show of it, like doing a vlog is like I'm gonna do a 3-hour walk to Nicey Treat.
There is another Nicey Treat location, or there was, but they closed the one in Broad Ripple and then they opened a different one. And there is another Slapfish location downtown. How do you feel about seafood?
I love seafood.
Positively?
I love
Well,
seafood.
this is
However,
exciting.
can I say something? Indiana
Yeah.
is a landlocked.
Oh, that doesn't matter, Samson. It doesn't matter. And here's what I'll tell you. Slapfish is very good, and then the pier seafood restaurant, I can't remember what the exact name of it is. It's across the street from Gamebridge, is also very good.
Living in Mexico for a few years, I do like on the coast. I do feel like maybe it's spoiled.
I'm sure. Like, I'm not going to
Wait,
discredit New
what do
England and
you
their
eat? What do
seafood.
you eat when you go? Are you eating like fish? Are you eating like scallops? You eating
Oh,
lobster,
all of
crab?
it. Lobster roll is what I get.
Oh, lobster is so good. Lobster is so good.
Scallops are good. Crab is good as long as it's Alaskan king crab. That's good. Salmon is good. I love salmon.
You
I
have
love,
the king of the crabs in Indiana.
yeah.
Do you sing "God Save the King" before you eat them?
I mean, sometimes I feel kind of guilty about it, about how difficult it is to harvest these crabs, and then I'm just sitting there and eating it. But
Yeah, that's
it's
kind
kind of
of.
like going to the zoo. Sometimes it makes me feel guilty, but I enjoy it so much.
There's Oleg has a shellfish allergy, so we don't do that in the house. His
Oh,
lips go like the size
yeah.
of his face, basically. It's pretty fun.
That's what you'll tell everybody. I'm going to Indiana so I can eat shellfish.
Yeah, finally.
But anyways,
Um,
well, this was a less controversial way to close it out. Got to talk about some of my favorite indie spots. You guys probably won't hear the controversial thing that we did talk about, but thanks for listening to all of it. Thanks for listening to the basketball. I think it will get better in Game 4. This is me trying to, this is a safe space. Be cathartic. Turn up the mood.
you should close out the podcast and say "Have a blessed day" at the end.
Okay, well, I'll try to do my best next Samson impression and just say that if you like the things that we talked about here,
Hmm.
I think that you'll like the writing that is at basketballshewrote.com, where Samson is writing gamers. He's no longer on his same hot streak, given that the Pacers lost, but I do trust him that when he's back at the keys once more, that they'll find their way along with him. And you'll be able to get that directly in your inbox if you subscribe. And I also do value if you subscribe as a free member, because then you'll get these videos emailed directly to you and you won't have to get on YouTube looking for them. So we appreciate the support. We appreciate you supporting us here in a free manner too, with all the comments, all the likes, all the subscribes, all the shares, all the good stuff. And until then, whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day.